Sir Martar kept Alice waiting for over an hour before deigning to receive her. Holt and Alice waited in the anteroom to Mortar's office. Holt stood to one side, leaning impassively on his long bow. Mortar was an oaf, he thought, as a courier and official business. Alice should have been greeted without delay. Obviously aware of her youth, the master of Combrack Keep was attempting to assert his own importance by treating her as an everyday messenger. He watched the girl approvingly as she sat straight-backed in one of the hard chairs in the anteroom. She appeared calm and unflushed in spite of the insult she was being offered. She had changed from her riding clothes when they were a few kilometers from the castle, and she was now dressed in the simple but elegant white gown of a courier. The bronze laurel branch pin, the symbol of her authority, fastened a short blue cape at the right shoulder. For his part, Holt had left his distinctive molted ranger's cloak folded on the pommel of Albert's saddle. His longbow and quiver, however, he retained. He never went anywhere without them. Alice glanced up at him, and he nodded, almost imperceptibly. To her, "Don't let him make you angry." She returned the nod, acknowledging the message. Her hands, which were clenched into fists on her knees, slowly relaxed as she took several deep breaths. This girl is very good, Holt thought. Mortag's secretary had obviously been well briefed by his master. After peremptorily waving Alice to a chain and leaving Holt to stand, he had busied himself with paperwork and resolutely ignored them, rising several times to take items into their office. Finally, at the sound of a small bell tinkling from beyond the door, he looked up and gestured towards the office. "You can go in now," he said disinterestedly. Alice frowned slightly. Protocol dictated that a courier should be properly announced, but the man obviously had no intention of doing so. She rose gracefully and moved towards the door, Holt following. That got the secretary's attention. "You can wait here, Forrester," he said rudely. Without the cloak, there was little to distinguish Holt from a yeoman. Yeoman. He was dressed in simple brown leggings, soft leather boots, and a green surcoat. The double knife scabbard had apparently escaped the secretary's notice, or perhaps he didn't realize its significance. "He's with me," Alice said. The unmistakable tone of authority in her voice stopped the man cold. He hesitated, then rose from behind the desk and moved towards Holt. "Very well, but you'd better leave that bow with me," he said, without quite the certainty that he had displayed earlier. He held out his hand for the bow, then met Holt's eyes. He saw something very dangerous there, and he actually flinched. All right, keep it if you must," he muttered. He backed away more than a little flustered, retreating behind the secure bulk of his desk. Holt opened the door for Alice, then followed her as she entered the office. Mortag of Cobram was seated at a large oaken table that served as a desk. He was studying a letter and didn't look up from it as Alice approached. Holt was willing to bet that the letter was about something totally unimportant. The man was playing silly mind games, he thought, but Alice was up to the challenge. She stepped forward and prompted a heavy scroll from her sleeve, slapping it briskly down on the table before Montag. He stared in surprise, looking up. Holt had a smile. "Alice Mainwaring, Sir Mortag, courier from Castle Redmond, my credentials." Montag wasn't just an oaf, Holt thought. He was a fop as well. His satin doublet was formed in alternating quarters of scarlet and gold. His reddish blonde hair was left in over long curls, framing a somewhat chubby face with slightly bulging blue eyes and a petulant mouth. He was of average height, but of somewhat more than average weight. He would be possibly handsome, Holt supposed, if he could shed some weight. But the man obviously liked to indulge himself. Montag recovered now from his momentary surprise and leaned back in his chair, adopting a languid, slightly disapproving tone. Good heavens, girl, you can't come in here throwing your credentials on the desk like that. Don't they teach good manners at Castle Redmond these days? He looked distastefully at the scroll and shoved it to the side. They teach protocol, Sir Montag, Alice replied very evenly, and it requires that you examined and acknowledge my credentials before we proceed. Yes, 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 Montag said, waving a dismissive hand at the scroll. Take it as read, take it as read. Now, girl, what brings you here? Holt interrupted quickly. The correct form of address, Sir Montag, is Lady Alice. Montag looked at Holt in genuine surprise, as he considered him some lower form of life who lacked the ability to speech. Is that so, for Forrester? He said. And what might your name be? Alice meant to speak, but a warning glance from Holt stopped her. He replied, still in the same quiet voice, Some people call me Arate, Sir Montag. It's Gallican, he added mildly. Montag raised his eyebrows in mock surprise. Gallican, you say? How exotic. Well, Master Arate, perhaps you could leave the talking to me and young Alice here. Would that suit you? Holt shrugged, and Montag took the moment for assent. Wonderful. Then, dismissing Holt, he turned his attention back to Alice. So, sweetheart, what do you have for me? A letter, perhaps? Some self-important note? From fair, fat Baron Harold, I'll be bound. There were two small spots of colour in Alice's cheeks, the only outward signs of the anger that was building up inside her at the man's offhand manner. She produced Nigel's heavy linen envelope from the stack she wore at her side and offered it across the desk. I have an official legal position prepared under Baron Harold's seal. He requested that you study it. Montag made no move to take the letter. Set it down. I'll look at it when I have time. The Baron requests that you look at it now, sir, and give me your answer. Montag rolled his eyes to heaven and took the envelope. Oh, very well, if it will make you happy. He slipped the envelope and took out this sheet of parchment inside it, skimming through it, muttering to himself, yes, yes, seen it, heard it before. Nonsense, rubbish, nonsense. He set the page down and pushed it away from him, shaking his head wearily. When will you people learn? You can send me all the letters you like. The fact remains, Cobram is an independent hold, owning an allegiance to Redmond fief. The treaty makes that very clear. I'm instructed to draw your attention to item 3 and 5 in the letter, sir, and paragraph 9 as well. They make it quite clear that the wording of the treaty is faulty, and your claim to independence is totally spurious, Alice replied. And now, for the first time, Montag shed the air of world weariness that he had assumed. He stood angrily. Superior? Superius, he shouted. Superius? Who the devil are you, a little girl in a gown, grown-up's dress, to come in here insulting me and saying my claim is spurious? How dare you? Alice stood her ground, unmoved by his sudden anger. I repeat, sir, you are requested to read those items, she said quietly. Instead, Montag threw the letter down on the desk between them. And I refuse, he shouted. Then his eyes narrowed. I know who's behind this. I see the hand of this sour-faced, shrewd Lady Pauline here. Now Alice's own anger flared. You will speak respectfully to Lady Pauline, sir, she warned him, but Montag was too angry to stop. I'll speak of her, all right. I'll tell you this. She is a woman meddling in a man's world, where she has no place. She should have found a husband years ago and raised a brood of squealing babies. Surely there's a deaf and half-blind man somewhere who would have taken her. Sir, said Alice, her own voice rising, you are going too far. Is that right, sweetheart? Montague replied sarcastically. Well, let me give you some advice. Get away from that shrill, pinch-faced witch while you still have time. Find a husband and learn to cook. That's all women are good for. Girl, cooking and raising the babies. Holt stepped forward before Alice could reply. The correct form of dress, he repeated quietly, is not girl or sweetheart, it is Lady Alice. You will show respect for the laurel branch that this courier wears, and you will show respect for Lady Pauline as well. For a moment, Montague was too startled to reply. First a girl, now a common forester, had told him how to behave. Oh, is that so? He raged. I'll show you respect. He picked up the letter and tore it in half. Then he did the same to the scroll bearing Alice's credentials. There's my respect. Now get out. Very carefully, Holt set his longbow to one side, leaning it against a chair. Alice raised a warning hand. Hold, don't get into trouble on my behalf, she said, but Holt looked at her and shook his head. Lady Alice, this fop has insulted you, your baron, your mentor, and the diplomatic service as a whole. He has shown absolute disregard for the laurel branch you wear, and by destroying your credentials, he has committed a crime that warrants a jail term. Alice considered his words for a second or two, then she nodded. Montague had been more than rude to her. His behaviour was totally beyond acceptance. You're right, she said. Carry on. But Montague had heard nothing after the word halt. The entire kingdom knew the legendary ranger's reputation, and the master of Combrack Keep paled now and stepped back as the grim-faced figure came towards him. But you said your name was... He struggled to remember it. Holt smiled at him. It was the smile of a wolf. Arate. Yes, well, more correctly, Arate. It's Gaelic for Holt. My pronunciation has never been good. His hand shot forward and locked in the scarlet and gold collar of the other man's dople. The satin tore momentarily. Then Holt gained a firm grip and dragged the struggling knight across the table towards him. Montague was taller and heavier than Holt, but Holt's hand, arms, shoulders, and back was conditioned by years of drawing the massive longbow with its pull weight of 60 kilograms. The thousands of arrows he had shot over and over again had turned his muscles into steel cord. Montague was dragged off his feet and hoisted across his own desk. The question is, said Holt, glancing at Alice, what should we do with him? She hesitated, then that wonderful smile spread over her face. I wonder, she said, does this castle have a moat? A group of servants were busy emptying the prying buckets into the moat when they were startled by a sudden drawn-out cry. They looked up in time to see a scarlet and gold-clad figure sail out of a first-story window, turn over once, and then land with an enormous splash in the dark, rancid waters. They shrugged and went back to work. I suppose I'll be in trouble again now, Holt said as they were riding home. Alice glanced at him. He didn't look very repentant. I doubt it, she said. Once people hear my report, I should think they'll say Montague got off lightly. After all, phrases like fat Baron Harold and sour-faced shrew won't exactly endear him to Baron Harold or Lady Pauline, and he did sign an acceptance of the letter in the end. As the official courier, On this mission, I thank you for your services. Holt bowed slightly from the saddle. It's been a pleasure working with you, he said, and they rode on in companionable silence for a while. I suppose you'll be leaving with an army soon, she said after a few minutes, and when Holt nodded, she continued, I'll miss you. How will I ever carry out diplomatic missions without someone to throw unpleasant nobles out the window? I'll miss you too, Holt smiled, and he realized that he meant it. He enjoyed being around young people, enjoyed their energy, their freshness, their idealism. You're a good influence on a jaded, old, bad-tempered ranger. You'll soon have Will back to keep you busy, she said. You really miss him, don't you? The ranger nodded. More than I realized. Alice urged her horse close beside his and leaned over to kiss him on the cheek. That's for Will when you see him. A ghost of a smile touched Holt's face. You'll understand if I don't pass it on in person, he said. Alice smiled and leaned over to kiss him again. And that's for you, you jaded, bad-tempered old ranger. A little surprised by her own impulsiveness, she urged her horse ahead of him. Holt touched one hand to his cheek and looked after the slim blonde figure. If I were 20 years younger, he began. Then he sighed and had to be honest with himself. Make that 30 years, he thought. Okay, well, thank you for listening to read up to chapter 12. If you'd like to listen to me read chapter 13, then please stay tuned. Thank you.